Hello, my name is Kate Valentine and I'm founder of Singing Mama's Choir, and I'm delighted to be here interviewing Penny Stone up in Edinburgh. Hello, Penny.
Hello.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and be interviewed. So if you're watching this as a movie YouTube premiere, then you will have just seen Penny teaching on Songline. And if you're watching it in the future, Songline was a thing that we did in the pandemic, that thing in 2000, if you remember it, 2020. So you can go on and check in on YouTube and watch Penny's song offer that she did for Songline too. So thank you, Penny. This little mini series here is a personal project of mine to get to know choir composers. Because over the years of doing Singing Mama's Choir, we've thoroughly enjoyed all of our songs, and it's high time we got to know the composers behind the songs. So are you okay? We just fire away with some questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, Penny. Would you just introduce yourself and your work? How would you describe what you do?
I'm a song leader, so I run singing groups, and I am also an activist. So I'm interested in radical songs and songs that help sort of support community and kind of proactive social justice, I suppose. And I write songs for those groups, and I like to share those songs with the network. I write all sorts of stuff, but the things that get finished are often the shorter, quicker songs for my groups, which is as much as anything because they're usable. They're quickly usable, and spending ages writing an extended, elongated choir piece is going to get less. It's going to get sung less. So so I suppose that's my focus. I write and sing songs myself. I run a radical folk club in Edinburgh, and I sing songs, sort of longer ballad-like songs that wouldn't work as well, I suppose, with singing groups, or would take a lot longer to learn. But the songs that I focus on for my choirs tend to be shorter, snappier. Let's get a hold of this in 10-20 minutes and then just really enjoy singing it rather than complex, longer learning stuff. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Okay, so can you remember the first time you ever wrote a song?
I remember the first time I finished a complete song and was like, this is a song. But I've always written poetry and always written songs. I've got pages from notebooks when I was a tiny child.
Earliest memory of creating or composing, whatever it was, whether it was text or music, the youngest Penny.
Youngest. I've got poems and songs that I don't remember writing, but I've got them written down that were me like 3, 4, 5 years old.
Wow.
All sorts, like silly little limericks and things about, my pets, like about a rabbit and about a cat and that sort of thing.
Were you writing?
Sorry, go on.
Were you writing these down, or did someone write them for you?
They're in child writing. And I wrote, in my early teens, I was very keen on Dick King-Smith books, and I wrote, I wrote the first 3 chapters of a novel about a donkey, that was totally lifted from the style of Dick King-Smith.
You've got these texts, have you?
I've got them all, yeah. I've got them all in a box somewhere, because my mum used to keep them.
Yeah.
But probably, as a teenager, I wrote angsty teenage songs with my guitar.
Okay, so what's the standout angsty teenage song that you can remember?
I can't remember any of them, but again, they're in the box. The first one that I properly remember would be when I was 15, and that was it was a social justice song, and I wonder if it stands out because of that. But it was semi stolen from streets of London, probably. But it was about us as a society not noticing or not seeing the humanness in people who are living on the streets. And I did that in my first GCSE year because
Do you remember the tune of it? Have you still carried the tune of that?
No, I've got it upstairs now, but if I grabbed the piece of paper, I could sing it for you. But no, what's the earliest finished song that I wrote? The first song I wrote as an adult, I suppose, as a fully formed adult person, was a song that I wrote for my grandpa, which is called Victory. And that is, my grandpa fought in World War One, and my mum was a sort of active pacifist, I suppose you would call her. And we had lengthy conversations about how that worked for my for my grandpa that he fought in World War One, and how he managed World War Two, as somebody who had experienced the trenches. And yeah, so the first fully formed song was that song called Victory, which is Victory with a question mark, which of course only written down, so it'd make a great poem, but when you explain the title as a song, you have to give the punctuation.
Yeah, that's given me a lot of, that's already given quite a bit of background into young Penny's life, and obviously your family life too. But what, with that Victory song, what was the impulse to write there? Was it, can you remember?
It came all in a rush. I was driving on a motorway, and I had to pull into a motorway service station. And it was after that I bought a dictaphone so that I could audio record. And it just, I'd just been processing these conversations with my mum, I think, and just processing how we, as a society, normalise war and the human beings at the centre of that. And I think it was, as much as anything, it was part of me processing understanding the world. And I think that is what my songwriting is, or a big part of my songwriting is me processing how I understand the world and making sense of it. And then the songs that I choose to share are the songs that I think will maybe help other people do that. And the songs that just stay in a box are the ones that did their job and, don't necessarily need to be shared beyond that process for me.
Okay, well, that box must be full of treasures. I'm just wondering, even going right back to the 3 and 5 year old Penny that was writing these, that was already beginning to process. What was your family life like with your mum as an active pacifist there, and her father in the war? Was it her father?
Yeah.
So what was going on in family life, and also involved with music as well? What was the family like there?
My mum's mum, my grandma, she was a pianist, and so I grew up with music around me. She was a classical pianist, and she actually had to give up being a piano teacher and playing the piano outside of the home because she got married, and at that time,
wow,
she had to give it. She married a bank manager, and at that time you had to give up all your work. So yeah, I think I there was maybe a sense of sadness about that, but I just grew up with Granny, who played the piano all the time. There's recordings of Granny playing the piano and little tiny child voice, me and my brother singing, which is a lovely thing to have. So the music was around. My mum was a beautiful pianist. I'm a mediocre pianist. And yeah, and there were books and writing, people who enjoyed words, I suppose. And my granny's sister, who was also around a lot, she was a poet. She was a terrible poet, but but she wrote loads of poems about her cats, but as a fully grown adult, and they're really hilarious and heartfelt and terrible. But she loved books, so I was surrounded by books and music, and so I suppose there was a natural impulse to create that was encouraged, particularly by my mum.
Were you sung to?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the lullaby. My mum used to sing Donna Donna, that Joan Baez's Donna Donna, to me as a kid, which I've since sung to many children and babies. Well, parents of young babies.
Your face is lighting up as you're even thinking about that.
Oh yeah, there's something about having the connection to those songs, isn't there? That yeah, and I don't know if I remember. I don't know how young I remember hearing my mum sing Donna Donna. I know, because she used to tell me about it, but she obviously carried on singing that as she was older, and as I started singing in folk clubs, that was one of the songs that I took on. And when you get to that point of passing that on to the next generation and singing it to, I've not got kids, but to sing it to my godkids and singing it to friends' children, yeah, it gathers its own meaning, and then you get ready to pass that on. And yeah, it's a songline. It's that's the name of your project is perfect for that, because it's the connections that make the songs have meaning.
Yeah, I think. Well, one of the themes from speaking to composers here is the inheritance, actually, of being sung. Yeah, big theme. Okay, so I want to know a bit more about Penny and younger Penny maybe. Did you study music?
I did. Ultimately, I went to the University of Liverpool and did a classical music degree. I knew that I wanted to do music. When I was a teenager, I didn't feel confident that I could. I'm not a performer. I can perform, but my heart is very much a creator and a teacher, and I do perform sometimes, but it's not the core of my being like it is for some people. And so I didn't feel confident that I could study music, but I had a really good music teacher, and I ended up taking a music degree that wasn't performance focused. So I was really interested. I'm a geeky research person when it comes to music stuff as well. So I did a lot of musicology and a bit of composition at university, and I ended up studying I did my undergrad dissertation on how the technologies of the 20th century had impacted the development of Gaelic vocal music on 3 different islands off the Western Isles of Scotland, which was fascinating and a perfect excuse to go and visit the Western Isles throughout my final year. So yeah, I did a music degree, but it was mostly musicology and that I studied. Yeah.
And that not being confident there, was that just specifically related to the fear of performing, or was there something else in that?
No, I mean, I think I'm a singer. Like, I do play the piano, I play all sorts of other instruments, mediocrely. But I didn't find singing until I was 15. And I'd been saying to my mum that I wanted to join a choir, apparently, for ages. And we saw this sign for the City of Derby Girls Choir. And she was like, "Oh, do you want to go?" And yeah, I want to go and do that. And there was an audition. And I was just like shaking to my core that I'd have to go and have an audition. It's not something I'd ever done before. I played the piano at that time and the saxophone. And I went and did this audition and was let in. And that felt really like, it felt like, oh, I can do this. And then I sung in this choir, Voices, up until I was 18, 19. And it was phenomenal opportunity. And then I had a few singing lessons with the woman who ran that choir, Anne Miller, because I felt like I was slightly behind. A lot of people had sung in that choir since they were about 11. And then I just started taking grades, and I'd refused to take grades in all the other instruments. I just played the other instruments for myself, and somehow Anne managed to trick me into taking the grades, and I took them all the way through. I took them to grade 8, and then ultimately I took a diploma in classical singing, a postgrad diploma, and I really loved that, and it gave me a huge it gave me a huge range, I think, with my singing, and I'm very grateful to Anne for all that she gave me. And the choir, we went on choir tours in European countries, and it was, great opportunities to be part of a singing gang. But after I did my degree, and I didn't get along with the sort of classical music world. It's a bit it can be a bit straight-laced and a bit confining, and I ultimately didn't feel that was the place for me, and I very much wanted to find it. My instincts ran against this sort of teaching from out with, rather than freeing from within. And I ended up, after I moved to Edinburgh, I ended up talking to a woman called Jane Schonfeld, who was a part of the Natural Voice Network then. She said, "Oh, you should go on one of Frankie's courses." And I went on Frankie's course. I was like, "Yes, these are my people." This is all of my instincts line up with what you're doing, and it was wonderful. And I feel very blessed for that. I feel blessed for having this whole, I have this whole background of classical stuff that that I draw on daily in my teaching, but that I also have this amazing way of freeing that binds us together in the Natural Voice Network.
Oh, it's fascinating to hear. It sounds like an excellent meeting point. What point did you meet Frankie? Frankie Armstrong, if anyone's wondering. Definitely look her up.
Yes. When was that? That would have been about 14 odd years ago.
Okay, so how many years after you've studied to work out your age?
It wasn't long after I left uni. So I finished uni, I moved up to Edinburgh, and within the year I'd gone on a course with Frankie.
And that was your entry into natural voice way of singing, having. Okay, what did that do for you? I mean, obviously you said you've talked on that a little bit, and also wanted to ask, the composing that you do now. Do you ever compose classical, like much more kind of classical music, or are you all in the natural voice way?
What it did for me, I think in many ways what it did for me, that it made me, it validated how I felt about the way to enable people to sing. And, you know, and I'm very much a teacher in my heart. And for me, teaching is about enabling. It's not about telling someone any answers, and it's not about, you know, making them stand in a certain way. It's about enabling them to find the way that is right for them to stand, and, you know, helping them, you know, asking the right questions to help someone find the answers. And if, you know, there's lots of educational worlds that take that tack, and for me, natural voice is the singing world that does that. And, you know, and it was great. It was just a great experience, that first week of training with Frankie. It was the first time I'd met her, and it was just great to be learning from somebody who is so masterful at something. And I seek that now, you know, when I'm looking for CPD. I'm not necessarily looking for somebody who teaches within our network per se, but I'm looking for somebody who really embodies what they do and how they do it. And, you know, I learn what I will learn in my work from that. And I just love watching and learning from people who are passionate about and embody what they're doing.
Okay, so on that, Penny, you're definitely one of those people for me.
Thank you.
Seriously, when you're speaking, so because I follow various different leaders and composers online and their work, and I do have, when you post, I you know, sometimes you kind of scroll on past, but whenever you post something, there's something that calls me, because I think that you're very much one of those people mastering what you do and very embodied in your work. And I haven't worked with you very much other than in January when we first met, but I just want to know more about, like, what do I want to ask? I mean, I've got a whole series of formal questions that I plan to ask you, but really I want to hear about your passion, actually. So related to your songwriting, I mean, you've talked about when you were 15 and the early songwriting with this kind of impulse for social good in the world, social change. Tell me, okay, let me find a question. What is it that makes you go, okay, I'm going to write this song now. I'm going to write a song about this. What happens?
There's two types predominantly. There's songs that I just need to, there's songs that I need to sing to help me process. And some of those are just whiny songs that I'll never sing to anyone, but the process of writing them catharts whatever I need catharted. And I used to stop myself from writing those because I didn't realize there was a function to them. But they're just like, I literally, you know, if I'm feeling stressed, I'll sit down at the piano and just bosh out some chords and just sing. And sometimes it doesn't become a song and sometimes it does. And that's fine. The other stronger thread is if I see a story that I think needs to be told. And for years, and I do, like I say, I do write longer ballads that tell a more sort of complex story. And I've got, you know, reams of lists of songs to write that I want more time to write, because they're voices and stories that I think we need to hear. And I didn't write them because I thought I needed to write really long ballads and I had to put all the information in it. You know, it had to be a biographical, great big long, you know, and get everything in. And I realized a few years ago that I didn't have to do that, and that actually the groups that I work with and that a lot of us as NVN teachers work with are, the most useful thing is shorter songs that have that harmonic, satisfying harmony quite quickly, and that actually I can help share more of those stories by writing shorter, snappier songs that do that. And I write those for my groups and share them with the network, if in case they're useful for other people. And I suppose the threads of those, there's a nature thread to that's just about you know, helping us connect with nature through music, because I love nature, and I think we can all feel better by reflecting it a bit more together. But the stories and the voices that I want to share are the ones that I'm really focused on. Like, I've got lists up in my office of the next 8 that I want to write. you know, that are priorities just now, and that's very much influenced by what's happening in the world. Yeah.
And what does that feel like when you know, when you've done the sit down and you're focused on that story and the message that you want to send? What is that, when the song is kind of arriving, does it feel a certain way for you? Is there any sensation, like, how does it arrive?
It makes me dance. And often, because I love rhythm, and you know, I used to write that my earlier songs for groups, people always said, oh, those rhythms are too difficult, Penny. And I think I've probably found a way to use the rhythms that I feel rhythm apparently complexly. So I you know, and I sometimes do simplify rhythms and think, oh, that's going to be too difficult, you know, let's even that up a little bit. But my natural rhythm is syncopated. So when a song is coming and I find myself sort of dancing around and so I feel it in my body, I suppose. And that's about the rhythm as much as anything else. Yeah.
So you get the feeling of the song before the words or the melodies? What?
Songs come in all different orders for me. So I was writing a song last night when I was cycling, and I had a quote. One of the songs. It's the anniversary next weekend of Grenfell, or when this comes up, it'll have been the weekend before, which is a horrendous tragedy. And I wanted to do a wee song that would highlight that. And I got a quote that I wrote down. I was listening to an interview of Yvette Cooper, who's been really involved in justice for the local community, which is her community there. And she said, oh, my dad always used to say to me, you got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. And it's a great line, and it's one that it's not just her dad that said that, but I've heard that in multiple places. But I thought, oh, that's a great line. I'll write that and I'll use that quote, which feels good, that that helps us connect with all sorts of things. But I'll use that to tell people this is this amazing woman, Yvette Cooper, who has been working for justice for the people of Grenfell. So it's a song that feels good because you got what's my tune? It's been evolving over the last week. You gotta stand for something. You gotta stand for something. You gotta stand for something, or you'll fall for anything. Something like that. It'll be changed by the time it's finished. But it's got that energy that energizes us as human beings, as people connected. As you can enjoy singing that. But the story that comes with it is difficult because lots of people died at Grenfell. So I think that how does it feel? That feels good, even though it's connecting with something that is a horrendous tragedy. And it's not, that's not always the case. I have and do, and we should write songs that express the pain sometimes. But I think often, if you can write a song that gives a feeling of momentum and connectedness, that's often, not always, often a better way to help connect with a difficult subject. So that's one of my filters that I try and put songs through, I think.
Right. Amazing.
Not always possible.
No, it's really interesting to hear. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking of your quote on the front of your website. Do you want to?
No, there's go with the quote. Yeah, it's the quote from Phil Oakes' song, and the song is "When I'm Gone," and it's the verse which says, "Can't be singing louder than the guns when I'm gone, so I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here." Or it's the whole verse, isn't it? Won't be singing louder than the guns when I'm gone, so I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. There's no place in this world where I'll belong when I'm gone. I won't see the golden of the sun when I'm gone. Can't be singing louder than the guns when I'm gone, so I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. Well, it's a smashing song.
Isn't it just?
I realised I couldn't remember the quote without singing it, but there we go.
And that's obviously inspired the title of your website, Sing Louder Than Guns, which of course we'll put all the links in here. It's so inspiring to look through your website and to speak with you, and to come back to the impulse for this series of Meet the Choir Composers really was to do with bringing composers to the front, because songs are shared so easily nowadays. We hear them by ear, and we obviously, if it feels good, like a lot of your songs feel good to sing, and the message behind them and the story behind them is that you do bring with your songs. I think it makes them even more share worthy. And so with the digital age, of course, we're able to share songs. So one of the impulses for doing this, these interviews, was to find out who's writing these songs, and what your life is like, and what your background's like, and what it's like to be a composer. So if we could just have a conversation now about the whole copyright thing, and how do composers get paid? How does all that work? You've got a quite a clear statement on your website, which a lot of people don't have. Some people are very clear that their songs are just for the giveaway, and they're not asking for money, and they're to be shared in the world. Other people are like, this is my livelihood, please pay for these songs, please don't publish, blah, 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 blah. Can you just talk about where you've arrived at on that?
Yeah. I am free and easy with my songs, and I actually made a website at the beginning of this year. Luckily, was making it. It was just about ready when the pandemic hit, so I was then able to use it, which is great. And my impetus for making the website was because I have got all of these songs that I've written that I write for my groups on a weekly basis, and I wanted to share them. And I don't make a living from writing songs. I have paid commissions, and I've written songs for money, but my primary income isn't as a composer. My primary income is as a teacher, and I am able to pay my bills with the teaching work that I do. So that's one of the things to say. But there's a great quote. I should find it really. Have you got the quote up there? There's a Woody Guthrie quote that I put up on my website because it's just how I feel about songs.
I'd love to read it, actually. I'm going to just be cheeky and take a moment to pull it up. Okay, here we go. Shall I read you the Woody Guthrie quote?
Do it.
Oh, where's it gone? It's here somewhere. Okay, so Woody Guthrie says, this song is copyrighted in US under seal of copyright number blah, 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 for a period of 28 years. And anybody caught singing it without our permission will be mighty good friends of ours, because we don't give a darn. Publish it, write it, sing it, swing to it, yodel it. We wrote it. That's all we wanted to do. And then after that, it says, I do have bills to pay. So if you're able to contribute to my work, you can also do so below. What a great quote.
It's a great quote. And I know it's always resonated with me. I think for me, there are a lot of complex issues involved. Intellectual property is important to discuss in the digital age, and it's so easy for things to be passed on without whatever information needs to be attached to them. And I do, when I share songs, I try, when I share my songs and other people's, I try to give as much information connected with that as possible. And the reality is there's always going to be people who hear a song and pass it on and don't know the context and don't necessarily find out where it came from or who wrote it. It's the same problem that you get with traditional musics, that we can accidentally pass something on that isn't necessarily appropriate. But I think there is a reality in the world that we live in that so much media is available on the internet that putting it feels like a false restriction to say, I'm going to sing you this song, but actually could you just not pass it on? That to me is really counterintuitive. And I think in our network, there are lots of people like me who earn their full living by teaching singing groups, and a lot of people who don't, who either just have one group a week and it's very much a part-time thing for them, and lots of people who aren't making a living, and lots of people who just want to share songs, and it's got nothing to do with, for them, it's got nothing to do with their finances, which I think is why it feels appropriate to me to put the donation. And I trust people, I trust people in the world, and very occasionally people will betray that, but by and large, if somebody is using music and getting money for my music and getting money for it, they'll make a donation. And if someone's using my music and isn't, then they don't. And I've got one of my pages, I put something up saying, please feel free to use these arrangements. If you want to pay it forward, buy a cup of coffee for the next person you see sleeping rough. I'm all right. I'm able to pay my bills. I don't need more money. I'm very, very aware that that is a privileged position.
Yeah.
So I think the difficulty, you know, and it felt important for me to be congruent. You know, that's how I feel. That Woody Guthrie quote speaks to me. And for me to be congruent, I had to say on my website, y'all can sing these songs. That's why I wrote them, because that's very much how I feel. And I appreciate that that's not how everyone feels. And I think as song sharers, that's what we have to be aware of, isn't it? You know, there are colleagues and friends of mine that I know who write songs that if you haven't bought the book or bought a license to teach it, that they don't want it taught. And I respect that as a teacher, but it's not how I operate.
Sure, and it's really good to hear clearly from you. Your stance on that is really important. And for me as a song sharer, not a composer, so I'm sharing songs with members of my choir and between leaders, I have a feeling just personally that I would love to see composers' work being valued higher. I mean, I'm talking also about the likes of Spotify, who pay musicians nothing.
Yeah.
And this thing about musicians being offered exposure for their in exchange for their work. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if composers were valued, you know, really differently? Can you imagine a world like that where we got?
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem. It's a problem across the whole arts, and I think it's a particularly big problem in community arts, because the funding for arts very often will go to what is sort of termed as like performance excellence stuff. There's been a bit of a fad in that for the last 10 years or so in funding stuff. So big opera companies perhaps are getting more funding, not that they're sufficiently funded, I should add, and smaller community groups are not, or community arts projects are less likely to get funding. And, you know, it's a problem that faces us in a capitalist world. You know, ideally, I would abolish capitalism, and everybody would have, you know, in the transition to that, we would have a universal basic income, and you know, everybody would be able to pay their bills. And let's talk about division of labour and artistic space after that. Do you know? You know, that would be my ideal. Capitalism does exist, and it's emotionally difficult. You know, I've got loads. I'm a low waged person. I didn't realise until quite recently that I'm a low waged person, because I can pay my bills, and that for me is enough. And I don't have kids, and you know, that makes a huge difference. Just, you know, if anyone's thinking, oh great, I could do that, it's completely different for different people. But I don't have dependents, so I can live off a really small wage, and be creative, and I'm lucky, and what we need to look at, I think, as a community, is how to enable more people to be able to do that. And part of that is financially valuing and supporting people in their artistic endeavours. How would we create a model within a capitalist society?
Maybe
it's so difficult, isn't it?
Slightly long,
so difficult.
But yeah, it's definitely worth putting out there in the thought space. Yeah. It makes me think of at the moment directives from NHS, where the primary healthcare is going to be funding NHS choirs. Choirs referred by GPs, health visitors, that kind of thing. So there's definitely recognition for the health benefits. Whether money follows, we'll see. But maybe that will start raising value of the arts in that respect. Yeah. Penny, we could talk for such a long time. I think it might be my job now to just wrap this interview up. I definitely missed a few questions, like what tools do you use? But I think you've covered quite a lot in your stories there, which is really nice. If anyone is watching this interview or is looking through your YouTube or your website and wants to be in touch, how do you communicate with people?
There's a contact form on my website. Just ping me an email. Always happy to hear from people.
Amazing. Hang on, I'm going to look down at my list and see, because I know there was a few things I really want to talk about. Have you got anything that you're really excited to share about at the moment, project-wise? I mean, I know you talked about the composition you're writing on your bike last night, which Amazing. Is there anything else that's really kind of burning within you that's going to be happening anytime soon?
I'm compiling. My women's choir are not meeting just now because of the pandemic, and I had been writing them a song a week of a different extraordinary woman. And so what I'm doing whilst we're away is I asked them to send in ideas of extraordinary women, which are, you know, endless in number. So I'm writing shorter songs about amazing women, one of which is the Cholita Climbers songs, and I'll put them together in a book probably towards the end of this year. But I'm really enjoying that. I'm enjoying learning about new women's doing amazing, or older women doing amazing things, and writing those into songs, I think.
Oh, definitely want to hear about that. Absolutely, 100%. Want to know as soon as that songbook's ready, and presumably you'll put stories in there with the songs.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Wonderful. Well, that's amazing. You give a lot to the world, Penny, through your music. Personally,
you know, there is one other thing I'd like to say. I would like to say, if people want to write songs, you know, and particularly song leaders will be aware of this, you don't necessarily know you can do it till you've done it. It's easier than you'd think. You just need to start singing and see where it leads you. And that's, you know, very often that's my process. I sing and sing and sing, and then I find something I like and I jot it down, and then I work on and edit and all the rest of it. But I would totally encourage people to try it, because I think it is one of those things like singing that people go, oh, I could never do that. And actually you can. It's more straightforward than you think it is once you give yourself permission to do it. So I would just like to say that to people as well.
That's brilliant advice. Do you work with people that are budding songwriters at all?
I do. I've done quite a lot of songwriting workshops with groups, and we've done some individual work in that, and did some stuff with the WEA a few years ago, working more with individuals. But I quite like facilitating group work, starting with sort of playing with improvisation and stuff like that, and just finding ways in that come from making sound, rather that come. I think we can get locked in our heads going, oh, you know, that sort of.
Oh, I know it well.
Logical processy bit. But actually, if we can start from our hearts, from our bodies, if we can, you know, feel a beat, or just start with a note and really feel comfortable with that, and use it to switch off our heads, then you never know where you'll end up.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Penny, if you've got nothing else on this afternoon, go and get that magic box of texts out, have a little read, see if you've got any gold in there lurking. Thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed.
You're welcome. Thanks for the chat.
Yeah, let's definitely stay in touch, and we'll look forward to all the riches to come.
Take care.
Penny, see you.